Welcome back to Shat on TV Westworld Edition, the unofficial podcast companion piece for the hit HBO television series Westworld. My name is Roger Roper, and sitting right across from me is my main man, Gene Lyons.
I miss you all so much.
And we are without our third component to Shat on TV because he has a very important work meeting that he is sleeping for that he's got to drive to. We are recording this on Sunday night. Gene, it feels a little weird that there was no Westworld.
The tweets started going out earlier today about what it feels like to have a Sunday ahead of you with no Westworld. The tears, the shakes, the scratching, the wandering in the streets, begging for just one more fix. It is definitely strange, Raj. The only thing that's kept this evening anchored is the fact that I was still, despite the show not being on, talking with you and Dick.
If there was, I don't know if you were anything like me when you were going withdrawals, but did Clippy climb your ceiling and then like his head turn back and look at you and then just kind of open up his entire face?
Yeah, it was amazing. Underworld was pumping in the background. It was really quite something. We found a way because there's a wealth of stuff going on with Westworld and so many podcasts that are working on this amazing content as well that it wasn't very hard to find some allies to create some additional content with.
Troy and Aaron over there at Beyond Westworld from goldenspiralmedia.com. We have been in communication with them because we go into some of the backstory here, so I'll save it for the podcast. But essentially, we got together and we did what we're calling a pod swap. And what this is just kind of a recap episode of something special that we wanted to do for the fans of both series. I'm sure that there's people of our audience that listen to both of us, but maybe there's not. So we figured we'd get together and talk a little bit about the season, and it's moderated by one of their fans, Kevin, who was just awesome. Like we're recording this now after we just got done with it, essentially is what happened. And we talked about a lot of really cool things, Gene.
Some people had said that they kind of wanted to know more about us, and we're very secretive people. But we did give a little bit of behind the scenes, as did the guys from Beyond Westworld. And a little bit later on in the pod, we actually, couldn't help ourselves, but stopped talking about ourselves, started talking more about, again, some unresolved business with Westworld. But I think of it as kind of a bit of a season retrospective, too, where we kind of went back, talked about some of our favorite moments, favorite characters, things that surprised us, and really got to know these guys and just kind of compare notes on what we were thinking about the show.
Yeah, so if you're a big fan of recap shows about a podcast that's a recap podcast about a show, you're in for a treat. This is a fun episode, and here is the pod swap between Shat on TV Westworld and Beyond Westworld. Cue Lewis Hertham.
Hi, folks. This is Lewis Hertham, the original Peter Abernathy. Hell is empty and all the devils are here on the Shat on TV Westworld Podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Just want to be sure we're on the same page.
We are recording. That's the only way I can shut Roger up.
Kevin, you're good.
We're good. Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Kevin Bachelder from the Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV podcast. I'm sure many of you are not familiar with me, but I'm just here to kind of wrangle these guys together. We've got some expert Westworld podcasters. You probably listen to one or both of their podcasts, so we're going to have some fun now that the season's over. So there's your spoiler warning. We're going into anything and everything that might have happened in season 1 of Westworld. And we're going to have some fun. So get comfortable. And let's start out first by saying, in a minute or less, introduce yourself and why you're so excited about podcasting for Westworld. Troy, you want to start us off?
I sure will. Thanks, Kevin. I am Troy Heinritz. I am part of the Beyond Westworld podcast. We were the OG, just one half of a day before the Shat guys. Just got into podcasting around 2013 with Under the Dome Radio, Resurrection Revealed, and also we did one for The Blacklist, which is our big show here on Golden Spiral Media, or at least it was until Westworld came along, and now Westworld just crushed it. Thanks so much for everyone listening to both Beyond Westworld and Shat on TV Westworld this season.
This is Gene from Shat on TV Westworld. I'm the, de facto literary expert and blog editor for the show. Just really excited about getting together with other people, getting some different voices involved in all this, and talking Westworld with you guys. And I will cut my time short because that's what I do.
Hi, this is Roger Roper, also known as the Raj. I am the sexy, raspy voice version. I'm the one who is mostly all over the Twitter and social media pages as well for Shat on TV. I got into podcasting with my buddy Big D down there. on Shat the Movies, and then we started Shat on TV shortly thereafter. Gene came on board at about, episode 7? Was it the Lost Boys Shat the Movies podcast?
Yeah, I feel like mom and dad just needed something to bring them together. They were fighting too much, and thus Gene was born.
We adopted a puppy. Adopt, don't shop. So, yeah, no, totally excited. Big fan of Beyond Westworld. As Troy mentioned, we were the first Westworld podcast on iTunes.com. So the OGs.
I'm Aaron Peterson with Beyond Westworld Podcast that I do with Troy, and why I was so excited about it, because it's Westworld, and it sounded great. I love the original movie. Michael Crichton is somebody that really inspires me, and it's something I was looking for. I was looking for another TV show podcast, because we were doing the Blacklist Exposed, and it was an idea like, let's find something that's going to connect. And I don't know why this one just felt like it was going to connect. All the stars were aligned, and boom, it hit. So that's what we ended up doing.
Hey, this is Big D from Shat on TV and the movies. I'm primarily responsible for the website, the editing, trying to keep Roger from driving Gene insane. I started it with Roger. We were doing movie podcast reviews of 80s and 90s films, because we would sit around and we would kind of dissect them on our own and say, how our memories were kind of fading and how we held them in such high regard, and they really weren't that good. So I said, you know what, other people might enjoy this. When Westworld was coming around, I'd been a big Crichton fan as well, and I knew the show was coming, and I said, this actually might be a good way to promote the movies, would be to jump onto it, and little did I know that it would be the focal point of kind of what we're doing and the direction we're going to take. And I just am so happy that it lived up to it. And we met Troy through kind of email, where we had registered Beyond Westworld prior to them getting to it. I think it was on SoundCloud. And even though we were the podcast that had no reviews, no followers, we were nobody. You guys treated us with a lot of respect, and we appreciated it. And you'd asked us if we would give up the name, and we did. And I think that's why we're here. We really appreciate when you could have easily just blown us off and been curt. We appreciate it. Thank you for welcoming us, because the podcast world can be cutthroat a lot of times. And you were very nice.
Well, thank you.
I know there were 30 some odd podcasts in the Westworld realm. Like, there was a BuzzFeed article or something like that, where there was already 30 some odd podcasts.
28 when the BuzzFeed article came out. I think we ended at 35.
Right. I found that, again, most of the podcasters, including you guys, were pretty cool. You don't have to name names, but were there any podcasts that were cutthroat and were like, you're stepping on our toes and we don't like you and don't come over here?
Well, no, I think we did it a little different. We did our format completely different from everybody else at the time, and that was intentional, because most podcasts do a scene by scene, and that's just not something Troy or I really want to do. We haven't done that with any other previous podcast, and it was intentional. We honestly, everybody's been very cool and cordial. There was an email from one, and I can't remember who it was from, because I just kind of discarded it. I really didn't care. I didn't care, and I don't want to say who it was, but they're one of the bigger ones. They'd sent an email about something, and I didn't even send it to Troy, because I'm just like, I'm not even dealing with it. Bye. We're having fun.
Didn't even happen. That's how much I didn't have to deal with it.
Now, you were talking about the names. I mean, what, I know some of the listeners sent in feedback, but curious about how you came to name your podcast, what they are.
Beyond Westworld came, and we were in a race to get that out. I mean, Troy can vouch for that. For Beyond Westworld, we were like, I kept telling Troy, I'm like, we got to get it out. We're not going to be the only ones that pick that name. We're just not. What it is it's a cult series. If you weren't aware of that, there's a TV series that spawned from the Westworld franchise. It went from Westworld to Future World, and then it spawned the TV series Beyond Westworld, which I think aired only 3 episodes and filmed 9. Is that right, Troy?
5.
All right, they only filmed 5, whatever it is. That's why Troy's here. So it was one of those things where I wanted a name that was part of the franchise, but not a known part. And that's where Beyond Westworld came from. So it was kind of just something that stuck, and it's something I've been working on for a long time. I think I started this project, back in July?
I knew even before that, right before Podcast Movement, we started it in June.
Yeah, it was like June. So it's been a long time going. So we were trying to get that first episode out of the gate. I remember around Labor Day, just trying to get it out there before anybody could claim it. And we got it everywhere else except SoundCloud. That's what we got. So
Well, that was so Big D and I were like, oh, what are we going to do? Because it's a race to, in the podcast world, for those of you who, a little behind the scenes, like where you get, how quickly you get your name of your podcast out really dictates where you show up in like searches. And where you show up in searches is usually, least point of resistance. So Big D was like, because we're new to it, we were like, well, let's just do Westworld. Like we'll be the first Westworld podcast. We'll show up first in Westworld.
Well, I'll be honest with you. It was a complete shot in the dark. I did it thinking, I said, there's nobody else there at the point that I actually went and added the feed to iTunes, because that's the big one. SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, those guys, you can usually get what you want. But iTunes, I said, I don't see anybody else there. I said, most people are going to search Westworld. So I submitted it. And when it came back that it was approved, I was more stunned than anything. And I think in the end, it really did help us, because anytime somebody would search Westworld, we were always the first to show. So I think it was just happenstance, and it was just all the stars were aligned. We got lucky.
But how did we come to Shat on TV, Big D? What's the story behind that?
Okay, I'll give you the story then. So Raj and I, we'd wanted to do the podcast kind of where we tore apart some of the movies, and we went back and forth with, some, psychological terms, referencing amnesia and mental damage. And one day I said, growing up, I used to love At the Movies, the TV show that was on for roughly 30 years. So I said, how about Shat the Movies? Since most likely we're going to be tearing apart and kind of, poo-pooing on them. So I said, let's do Shat the Movies, and we'll just pick the host's name from the 30 years, and we'll do, a mixed bag of them. And that was kind of how it started. And the reason for the anonymity for me is I work in a field that it would be bad. The press and my job is in the public eye. So if my employer has ever heard me talking about some risque point about like two boys in a shower in Weird Science, it wouldn't be good for me. So that was why we came up with the names. And a lot of people asked that. And no, it wasn't that we were trying to be cute. It was more just to keep the mystery and to keep my day job.
Are you telling me Gene that's not his real name?
Silent. We'll take that silence as meaning something.
No, okay, that's the way we usually keep Raj.
Yeah.
If you see us do this, that's Raj's time to know. Let's move on to the next one.
Yeah. For those of you at home who, aren't getting the nonverbal cues on a podcast, BD is covering his eyes right now. Yeah. The yes and moments are beautiful on Shat on TV and Shat the Movies. Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, that certainly gives you folks a chance to understand where these guys a bit are coming from. But I know from listening to both of the podcasts you guys put out, you covered things very well. But one question I want to kind of start and throw out to you is, of all the things that happened in season one, if you had to pick your favorite storyline or story reveal, or maybe character development, that favorite bit, what might it be for you? Big D, you want to start with that one?
I was hoping Gene kind of would have one, because in our list here of talking points, we talked about favorite episodes, and mine's very emotional. So I think I was hoping Gene would have something that would be more deep thought and kind of retrospective.
Sure. I mean, for me, it was recently we had a letter that came in on the Westworld Telegraph, which is our edition that we do once a week where we do listener mail. And someone had brought up the concepts of posthumanism and transhumanism. And, I'd been struggling a lot with my appreciation of the show, because I felt like it introduced a lot of concepts early on, religious concepts, creationist concepts, and psychological concepts, and then didn't really fully explore them to the depth that it could. It kind of spiraled out to some sort of an action thriller mystery, And what really brought it back for me was this idea that there was still underlying this potential where we were asking the question of what it means to be human. What if the human form is the cornerstone of what it is to be human, and really that, again, coming full circle, making a big loop over 10 episodes, getting back to the question of who is more human, the hosts or the guests, and how do you define what a human is? So for me, the show, if it did anything right, it did that right.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing from our side, because when we started out, we had this very kind of deep conversation in our first episode, and I think we followed it up in our third episode of the podcast. We were kind of talking about Aaron's pitching to me the whole time, like, oh, for you, Troy, this is going to be a really bad show, lots of nudity, a lot of sexy time. You're not going to be able to watch it, because I'm I'm more of the kind of purist stance.
Lame.
So I'm the prude of the five of us, six of us here tonight. And I really was looking at it from like the same thing of a religious aspect of what does it mean to be a human? Do we put a lot of faith in God? Do we kind of do things on our own? Where does that concept lie? And the whole reveal with the Michelangelo painting towards the end of the series, I thought that was just fantastic because it really brought up that question of, if we end up making artificial intelligence in our own image, are we not just like God in that sense? If you believe in the creation concept of God creating man. So that was one of the big things. And I thought out of the entire series, Jeffrey Wright's character of Arnold, now Bernard, was really interesting to watch those happen as it unfolds, right? You don't know it's Arnold at the beginning, but now that you know that it's Arnold, to go back and just see that he can be both man and machine and have the same kind of concepts and feelings and carry on. It just really blows your mind as far as what does it really mean to be human at the end of the day. And the fact that we have to ask that question coming out of this first season, I think really is why the show was so awesome in the first place.
Yeah, I was going to say, from a character perspective, the one character that really surprised me, and we kept waiting for him to reemerge in other episodes, but if you still go back and you watch, the binge watch the entire series again, the one character and the one actor that just really stood out for me, even though he's really only featured in one episode, is our boy Lewis Hertham and Peter Abernathy. Yeah. I encourage all our listeners to both shows, go back and watch it. It still blows you away. Even though you know what happens, the acting job that Lewis Hertham did it's still mesmerizing to me. It's fantastic. And I really hope he comes back for season 2, because that, for me, if one character can make an impact in just one episode throughout, a 10 episode arc, that to me means something. And so, got nothing but love. I really hope he gets nominated for something.
Yeah. Excellent stuff. Now, when you look, obviously there's those parts that are just, you're going to fall in love with and be very curious about as you go through a whole season of this. What about a storyline or maybe a character that it really surprised you how attached you got to that? Or you really weren't expecting to care as much as you did about something that turned into quite a big part of why you enjoyed the show? Troy or Aaron?
He's pointing to me, so I guess it's me. Honestly, the Maeve storyline, based on your question, for the first couple episodes, I couldn't care less. It felt to me like it was just meandering, I guess. I didn't see where it was going, even though I still struggle with why is he okay with, killing all his coworkers. By the time that thing played out, I was enamored with her entire arc. Everywhere she went, where she came from, and how Tandy Newton developed that character, taking into account everything that she had to do for that character. The biggest part for me was how she played the nudity. And I know that sounds weird, but every other TV show I've ever seen with nudity, and especially, Game of Thrones gets a lot of references because of this show. Game of Thrones is naked for naked's sake. That's every time I see it, I'm like, oh, she's naked. Why? 'Cause, there's really no drastic reason for it. Tandy Newton's character, Maeve, really started to feel like it was necessary. And it wasn't because for shock value or to get the audience excited in layman's terms. It was because it's basically showing her power. She's building her power, and that nudity really wasn't a factor for her because she's using that to control the situation, because we are, as humans, we get embarrassed, we get we're a little shy, we're a little hesitant. That's our weakness. We're naked and we feel afraid, we're scared, we're terrified. Her, not at all. And by the end of the series or this season, she really emboldened that whole concept of you use your sexuality as power, and not necessarily in the worst sorts of ways. She's using her sexuality to showcase our weaknesses, and it really benefited. And you can see it in the scene with Logan, where Logan's riding away buck naked, and he's just a weak, broken man. And it's because of that. It's because humans, while we're stuck riding around buck naked, that terrifies us. That's humiliating for us. She uses that to her advantage. And you see that in the very end when Armistice and Hector are both naked, and they use that vulnerability against their captor, so to speak. It's just that whole arc from start to finish really showed a beauty that I didn't expect, and it really surprised me, and it took me by the end of the series, I was really impressed with that, because for a while I was, there came a point where I'm like, why has she got to be naked so often? That seems silly. And then by the end of it, I'm like, I get it. I mean, it's really to desensitize us and actually showcase that she's using that nakedness to her advantage. And the other characters ended up doing it too, and ended up killing people because of it.
Yeah, if I can dovetail into that, I watched the show with my wife, and it was the scene, I believe, where Felix had brought the bird back. And Thandy's sitting there completely exposed on the gurney, sitting there nude. And I said to my wife, I said, has she been naked almost that whole scene? Like the nudity became secondary. It became truly clinical. It was as if I was watching a piece of machinery. And I think I said that on one of the casts, that at no point did I look at her and think, oh, that's Thandie Newton. It was never in my mind. They got you into the scene, and she was a piece of property. And I think they successfully used nudity, whereas Game of Thrones uses it for shock value. And I think Thandie, did I pronounce it?
No, it's Tandy. I found out
sorry. Thandie Newton. She allowed us to see her that way. So the written word on the script is one thing, but for her to get us to actually feel that on our couches shows what level of a talent she is.
You talk about that vulnerability as an actor. Can you imagine if you're Lewis Hertham or you're Evan Rachel Wood, and the script calls for you to be naked because, that's because you're a host and you're a robot, and, there's a very specific reason why the character of Dr. Ford wants all the hosts to be naked, right? We learned that throughout the season. But like, as an actor, you think, oh my God, not only do I have to act against Sir Anthony Hopkins, but I got to do it naked. You talk about like that vulnerability and the fact that most, if not all, the actors pulled it off brilliantly. But to answer your question, Kevin, for me, the storyline or character development that was my favorite was Sir Anthony Hopkins himself, like was Dr. Ford's character, right? We're supposed to believe throughout the entire season, for most people, he was the villain, right? We got a lot of listener mail, a lot of listener feedback, from episode 1 all the way through episode 10, that he was the villain. For me, I saw him in a different light. And I think that has to do with the subtleties that Dr. Ford's character develops, and the fact that, that Anthony Hopkins did just an amazing job with it, where, in my opinion, and we talked about this on, a couple episodes, especially the last ones, where I give very specific reasons why I think he's the hero, right? He's the one who actually completes Arnold's task of releasing the hosts, the robots, from their controlled loops and, sets them on this path, right? He is the hero, and he does that without overtly becoming the hero, right? It's not like almost like the reveal of William to Man in Black, where it's, we actually see him put the hat on. It's the Indiana Jones reveal, of like the older one, it's that, you know what I mean? Like it was a more subtle approach to a character development that at the end you're like, holy smokes, it creates a conversation. We know by the end William becomes Man in Black because it's very, known to us. But the fact that we can still debate probably till 2018 whether or not Dr. Ford is a hero or a villain, that to me is a more interesting conversation.
I just want to add to that. When you mentioned the Indiana Jones moment, I had somebody at work come up to me because they were raving about this show after it was done, and said, "Can you believe that reveal? I mean, I've never seen anything like it." I'm like, "Yes, you have. It was called The Last Crusade. It's the exact same scene."
We like to use Indiana Jones and Star Wars references.
Hey, I'm with you, man. Indiana Jones for life.
Now, speaking of reveals and looking at it that way, obviously as podcasters, we'd love to, shall we say, overanalyze everything. With all of the analysis being done about this show, was it even possible to surprise us?
Well, I think the definition of surprise is really where you have to draw the line there, because, yeah, sure, people said literally after episode 2, William is the Man in Black. Oh my gosh, we're in different timelines, which, of course, the timelines thing grated on everybody's nerves because it's time periods, not timelines. But when you think about what people were revealing and the internet detectives that were out there, and you tried to like put that in perspective when you went back to watch Lost, a lot of this stuff like Facebook groups and Google Hangouts and a lot of that thing didn't exist when Lost was out there till the end of Lost. At that point, we kind of had some stuff figured out, even though it was still being written because nobody really knew how it was going to end, even at the last moment. But at the end of the day, I think with the internet detectives out there now, I think it was different because I almost wanted it to happen for them, because they put so much effort into circling moles and circling knife handles and copying this and copying that and putting them together. Just the amount of effort that people put into being an internet detective. I just wanted it to happen to make it right for those people, so it wasn't a waste of their time. Because, man, if it was wrong, those people, I think they would probably have jumped off a bridge or something if it didn't happen the way they intended it to happen. For me, I thought it was, even though we said, hey, we think Bernard might be Arnold or Bernard's a host.
Let's not go with we. Let's not go with we.
You said host. I came up. I said the Arnold Weber was, or Bernard Lowe was Arnold Weber.
I said both. That's cool. You go ahead.
Yeah, I had the anagram on the first episode.
We've got audio proof. I'm just saying.
Seeing that happen and then actually seeing it play out and actually be true. I mean, when the whole, what door happened, it was like, holy crap, that was just a beautiful moment, because even though we were right, then it was still the way they revealed it was so powerful that it almost was still a shock and surprise at that moment.
I have really two thoughts on it. One is that, an analogy that I heard that helped me with it was I was getting very annoyed, actually, at a certain point with the fact that they were throwing riddles at us that were just too easy to solve. And then someone mentioned that it was, don't think of it as a riddle, think of it as a puzzle. And when you look at a puzzle, at some point when you're putting it together, you see where it's going. You understand what it is that you're looking at, but it's still enjoyable to see the pieces fall into place. And if you view it through that prism, it's actually a really enjoyable, experience. One of the other things that upset me, though, was that people are throwing out so many theories that someone's bound to be right. And when people were, then taking credit for it, they're not really checking their scorecard, I guess, to see just how wrong they could be about stuff. And when I said on a few podcasts that I was a little disappointed that they were so dependent on tricks, people called me out for kind of poo-pooing the show and being a malcontent because we'd figured things out. And that wasn't it at all. It was that there should be enough show beyond the tricks that it's still something worth watching.
And I think the challenge that when we came back to, were we upset with all of the stuff and all of the theorizing? At the end of the day, I was kind of disappointed in the finale in one sense, which was I wanted there to be one thing that was a surprise. Just one thing. Because even Ford getting shot, we kind of talked about, it's got to be a blood sacrifice. And you can kind of see that was all coming and kind of telegraphed and how it was all going to go down. There really wasn't one big shock at the end. And I was almost kind of hoping for that one big reveal that would have just blown everybody away. So from that perspective, I think maybe, it was a little bit of a letdown to know everything. Still enjoyable tenfold, seen it like 5 times now, the finale. But at the same time, one surprise would have been great. And clearing out cold storage wasn't a surprise. We knew that the army was going to rise up all the way from the first episode. So one surprise would have been great.
Let me ask you guys this. Because you bring up a good point there, Troy, regarding the big surprise at the end. If you were to look at this from across 10 episode arc, the idea that Dr. Ford, who is typically viewed as an all powerful villain who is controlling everything, everyone is happy here under his control, but at the end he is responsible for their release. Wasn't that kind of a surprise? Because when you think about it, the man in black completing the maze, you almost kind of thought that he was going to be the one that was going to save Dolores and save, there were a lot of theorizing and a lot of emails. God, I think we received like 700 emails, throughout the course, almost 70 emails per week. But a lot of people thought that was the purpose. That was going to happen. But then when the man in black gets to the end, we find out that it's just a toy. And it's actually the guy who you thought was going to be the one that is holding them back is the one that actually sets them free. So if I were to say there was one surprise, Kevin, that was the big surprise to me. And that was one thing that, you could put the pieces together and it makes sense now. But the fact that Dr. Ford was setting up all the puzzle pieces and the dominoes throughout every episode, if you go back and you watch it again, knowing that that's what he's doing, and at the end, that's the big reveal. I don't think a lot of people knew that going into episode 10. Absolutely. So that to me, that was probably the one big surprise.
I'm with him 110%. That's the one thing, while everybody was talking, all I'm thinking was, that was a big surprise. Everybody had a billion theories on what the Man in Black was doing, myself included. Nobody thought, hey, it's going to be a kid's game. I had never heard that one come up. So that should be considered a surprise, I would say.
Yeah, and I'm glad. I think shows go wrong when they try to force a surprise just to do it. We see so many shows there, we need a cliffhanger. We need something. We need to kind of get them at the last second to have them come in next season. And they're generally forced. And I'm glad that they didn't in the last second say, ooh, the man in black, it's Logan after all, because that wouldn't have been genuine to me. But we talked about on our Telegraph, and again, I to me, because it's not been proven yet, but I was surprised. We assumed all along that Dr. Ford was threatened by the image of the maze. He sees it on the table. He sees it throughout his travels through the park. And we assumed, when he met the man in black, that he was trying to feel it out because he was trying to protect himself from something that possibly Arnold had done to circumvent his power. In the very end, we find out, no, Dr. Ford's been protecting. He's been an advocate for the hosts this entire time. And that made me look back at his family in the cottage. We had always assumed his family, which was a gift from Arnold, was something he coveted, something he loved. And then we started to kind of reevaluate it and see that maybe his family was his first attempt, his experiment to try to replicate the factors that gave free will to the host the first time. He knew that it was a traumatic event that would do it. What other reason would you take a perfect idealistic representation of your family you've lost and give your father a drinking problem that he had? Why would you reinstall all of these flaws other than to traumatize young Robert Ford, traumatize the brother, the dog, trying to replicate? And I took it as maybe this was his first attempt to actually, get the host to become aware. And the maze became almost him being clued in on what it was until he realizes at the very end what the steps were and how to actually give them free will. So in the end, I could turn out to be completely wrong. But the fact of Ford's reveal and how it made me go back and think, to me, I think it nailed it.
Now, you all actually in different ways, talking about that question a little bit, talked quite a bit about the feedback and the theories. And, Gene, you brought up a good point about, the old adage of even a blind squirrel will find a nut, meaning if you throw out enough theories, eventually something's going to be right. Were you folks ready for the onslaught of the volume of feedback and input that you got from listeners? I mean, I'm sure you thought there was going to be some, but did you have any idea of the volume, not only just your podcast, but even online? You couldn't go anywhere without hearing something about Westworld. And did that impact how you were podcasting about it?
I will say, because we run the podcast or the Facebook group Beyond Westworld, which blew up way bigger than I think Troy or I ever intended. It got nuts. I mean, people were theorizing over everything, which is great. I mean, it's a twofold. One aspect of it is fantastic because there's nothing more you want, especially as a podcaster who's talking about a TV show that you love. There's nothing you love more than seeing fans actually react to it in any way, shape, or form. Just react. And, often it happens. You'll talk about something and you get no reaction. So there's nothing. But this show got more reaction than I've seen since, as Troy is paid to mention every episode, Lost. Because that series is the same thing where people were just talking about it nonstop. And we got theories every time something happened. Somebody had a theory about it. And I think a lot of people have asked me, what was the craziest theory? And I think we're going to talk about that a little later. And, what was the theory that was most prominent? Man, I couldn't even narrow it down. I saw so many different variations of theories and ideology within the Facebook group and in emails and on Twitter and everything else that I've never seen on any show, on any level. And I think because we were part of the podcast, we had to pay attention to it more than we, normally. If you were just going about your everyday life, you could probably tune it out, even though it sure seemed like nobody else was. But because we were doing this, we kind of paid attention to it. And I lost track I think I was actually counting up to 150 different theories about things happening on the show. I actually kept the count. It was 150. And at that point, I just stopped counting, like, you know what? It doesn't matter. It's great. And that's where the other aspect comes in, is that it became overwhelming because you didn't know what you should take seriously anymore. Because it was hard to even tell people how much you were just enjoying the show without them wanting to theorize about it. And really, sometimes you just want to say, it's kind of, I use a football analogy. If you play fantasy football, all anybody ever wants to talk about while they're playing fantasy football is how their team did, or how their players did, their scores and everything else. They don't actually want to talk about the games anymore. And that's kind of what it became, I just want to talk about the theories I have. I don't want to talk about the show. So that part of it was a little negative, but overall, it was just fantastic seeing all the interaction. I've never seen anything like it. I don't know if I ever will again in my lifetime, honestly.
I'm going to have to agree with you. Personally, I was not ready. I don't think, Big D or Gene were either, for the amount of emails that we receive each week, which, by the way, testament to the fans. Thank you so much for sticking with us and writing in and taking the time. If you saw some of these emails, and again, you can go to shadontv.com, click on Westworld Telegraph, and we're still, I don't know, what, 2 weeks behind in backlog, Gene? I
believe we're, just at the end of November right now, November 29th.
The end of November. So we would read, we started off the Westworld Telegraph on episode 2. I think it was episode 2 that we did, and we read them all. And then episode 3, we read them all, and that was like our 3-hour podcast that we said never again.
I actually was against it. They started reading them on, on the main pod, and they said, should we add a different one? Should we add the Telegraph to all this? And I said, absolutely not. I said, I've studied this. I've been to conferences. I'm a digital marketer. I know that the golden rule is 1 a week, 40 minutes or less. And they're like, let's just try it out and see what happens. And how wrong I was.
Yeah,
we missed Game 7 of the World Series because of that podcast. We started recording in the rain delay, and 3.5 hours later, never again.
You can hear Gene on. You hear Gene on that episode say, Cubs win. Dang it! Like we took time out of reading an email to talk about the World Series. But yeah, no, I was surprised about how the Westworld Telegraph consistently out-downloaded we did a 3-episodic arc every week, and the Westworld Telegraph that we did every Thursday out-download. People just love to hear themselves. People love to hear theories. And by the end of it, it became so much that we I think whittled it down to the top 15, if I'm not mistaken. And then it became competitive. I thought, no one's going to write in if they know that they're not going to be. No. People were like, well, shoot, I'm going to write a 5-page novel now because it's going to get read on the Telegraph.
Which does that not go exactly to the entire concept of Westworld? It was I have to have this theory, I have to have this theory, and even if I have the same theory as somebody else, I'm going to post it anyway because maybe someone else didn't see that post. And it was literally a competition to see who was going to be the number one person. I think that was what was really fascinating about the fans in this whole show was they really wanted to be right, and they wanted to make sure everybody knew they were right, and they literally wanted to hear themselves. And because of that, it almost felt like it was the exact concept of what we're trying to portray in the show, which is humanity is kind of selfish and depraved in a lot of ways.
I have to tip my hat to Troy and Aaron, just the fact that I realize that the lower the price of entry to making a comment, it tends to be the worse the thoughts are, right? So like when someone has to write an email, they got to really sit down and think about that. But on a Facebook group, I've seen it's like it's so much easier. You can just type whatever. You might be in your car and like typing one-handed and so kudos to you guys for sifting through all that.
Oh my God. That's just brutal. Some days it was just brutal.
One thing I've learned is that a podcaster, you never want to keep your own score. And by all means, never brag about whether or not you're right or not. You want to talk about the onslaught of feedback that we received on our YouTube channel page, which, by the way, I thought Twitter was like, that's where all the trolls would hang out. No, they hang out on YouTube. I was completely I thought YouTube was like a nice place. It is not. You never read the comments. Never read the comments.
No, the internet is no longer.
Yeah, it is not a safe space.
It's funny.
If I can just chime one thing about the emails, I think besides the fact of people wanting to have their theory be right and be first, I think it also filled that hole is that a lot of people were watching the show alone. I would get messages where somebody said, hey, thank God we have, all these different podcasts to listen to because no one in my family's watching it. I don't have anyone to talk about it with. We provided that friend that you could bounce ideas back and forth. And it was truly a communal experience that we all watched the show together. So I don't always think it was I had to be right, I had to be first. It was more that we had at least someone to talk to. And I think we gave them a voice and they talked to us. And I think that was one of the most rewarding things.
Which I thought was weird because I had 7 people at work that were watching the show. And I didn't know any of them were watching it until after the finale. They were all like, dude, Troy, did you watch Westworld? And I'm like, who hasn't watched Westworld? Hello. And
not only that, I have a podcast that you guys need to go on iTunes and immediately download and rate for me.
Yeah, I could not believe that there were people watching it that I could have been talking to in real life for a change, and nobody said anything.
You're talking about trolls. the worst part about doing the Facebook group, and I think at current standing, we have the Beyond Westworld still the biggest Westworld Facebook group
by far.
And I'm not saying that to brag. It's more to say, holy crap, there's so many people. It's like 22,000 or something now. And we've administered it the entire time with very specific goals, which are, when the show airs, we're going to try and keep it as spoiler free as we can for at least like 24 hours, because there's people overseas, there's West Coast, there's a lot of people that don't see it at the same time. Let's try to be respectful. Just have spoiler tags and then, spoil in the comments, that kind of thing. And also, no theory is going to be treated poorly. We're not gonna allow some troll to come in and just call you names and everything else. I mean, it was a real goal of ours, and it's amazing to me how many other groups in the world and other podcasts, and definitely not you guys. You guys don't do that at all. You're great with fan interaction. But other podcasts that are very similar in vein, that are not similar in vein. I'm sorry, that do not curt that. They don't kick it to the curb. They just let it fester, and it just feels like that's not fun as a fan. You don't want to go and have some crazy off the wall theory and then have somebody shoot it down or talk down about it. That's not fun as a fan. And I've seen more and more that trend is starting to get better, to where I see more and more groups are changing the way that they do things and kicking those trolls out and getting them out of the way. And maybe someday YouTube will follow suit. I just rambled. Sorry, I like to ramble.
No,
Yeah.
you're good.
But related to that, so having done the podcast for this first season and all this wonderful feedback and all, I mean, what would you say might have been the best thing about doing the podcast for this show?
I think the idea of creating a community, I think that was just touched on in the last response by a few of us here. But the fact that I've communicated with people from Sweden, from Australia, from the UK, everywhere around the world. It was truly a worldwide phenomenon, and to have those people message us directly on our Twitter page or our Facebook page or our individual Snapchat accounts. I know Gene runs Snapchat for us, and he receives all the pictures of people listening. And he posts crazy photos of bananas, asking if you're going to go bananas for our next episode. Like, the fact that we connect, and the show had such an impact, in the zeitgeist of pop culture, not only here in America but everywhere around the world, I think is not only a testament to how brilliant the show was, but also the fact that as we move away from traditional means of media to more directed, focused means of information, where people, like, I'm interested in Westworld, right? I'm going to go on iTunes or Zencaster or wherever, and I'm going to download 15 Westworld podcasts. And then of those 15, I'm going to stick with, these 4 or 5. Or if I'm Carrie, I'm going to listen to them all, and I'm going to talk about how I listen to them all, right? But I think that sense of community was really cool. And I think podcasters, unlike any other show, maybe lost, but I mean, that was still in the infancy of podcasts. I don't think there's any other show that turns to podcasts for answers in a manner like Westworld.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, this isn't our first rodeo to the TV fan podcast space. We were actually on a network called TV Talk back in the day. And when we came to do Westworld, it was like, gosh, we kind of done this and we got the format down and it'll pretty much be easy going. What I found was really great about doing this particular podcast, especially, was the Facebook group for us, because it was really interesting to see how many people would actually throw up just spew stuff into the group, like, oh, Bernard's a host, called it, and literally as the scene happened, someone was posting it in the group. And so Aaron and I had to sit there, throughout the show and all through Sunday night, delete, going all the way through, killing all these spoilers, and just maintaining that constant battle for like the first 24 hours. You really got to feel the sense of the internet really being an interesting place. Like, I always used to think, because we do the Blacklist show, and we have a nice Blacklist group over there, about 1,500 people. It's nice and calm, pretty self-maintained. And we thought that the Facebook group would be the same for Westworld. Boy, were we wrong. I mean, this was a full-time job from Sunday until Monday. And it wasn't so much just getting rid of the spoilers, but then, like Aaron was talking about, it was getting rid of all the people that were dissing on people or hating on people. And the number of comments that we got back about, man, this is really the best place to talk about Westworld. I've had so much fun being in this group. I mean, there were even like mini cults that came out of it, of their own little small subgroups that kind of broke out.
I have a question on that.
Yes.
So it's the where is, there was a woman.
Oh God.
What is it's Kay? Where is Kay? Talk about the where. So take us back, take the listeners back, and take me back. The where is Kay phenomenon in Beyond Westworld. What happened there? Okay,
so Kay is this poor woman. She joined the Facebook group. Somebody added her to the Facebook group. She didn't want to be part of it. And she obviously was someone who didn't understand how Facebook worked. And, she didn't understand the concept of how to remove herself from the group. That's really what it boiled down to. So she put a post that said,
it's okay as my mom, is what you're saying. It's okay as my mom.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's just.
Or your grandma.
Understand. Yeah. Put a post and said, hey, look, I didn't ask to be added to this group. Please remove me from this group. I don't want to be here, or something along those lines. And her name was Kay. And she's become a legend. So Troy inadvertently, I mean, he was doing the right thing, but this thing exploded like over a matter of what, an hour, maybe 2 hours, or like
2 hours, yeah.
Posts or something. People just jumped all over it and made it like this internet meme. And they started taking pictures of her dog from her profile pic and making memes out of it. And just making random things. They created a new Facebook group for it, like Beyond K. It was just, she's become sentient, that sort of thing. It just ran with it. Complete Westworld themes. And actually, Troy's the one that he deleted it, and he did it in good faith. But he deleted the thread because he's like, okay, you guys, like this poor woman, she doesn't know what she's doing. I'm going to delete this entire thread. Well, that was the worst thing he could have done, apparently, because it made it a legend. And now, because everybody asks, can we see it? No, it doesn't exist anymore. You can only find it if you know Kay. And it's just becoming this.
What thread?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And so randomly, you'll be posting in a Beyond Westworld group, and you will see references to Kay, and then you'll see a picture of a very adorable dog pop up with a cowboy hat and a random memes left and right. It's hysterical. It's kind of sad for her. I don't know what happened to poor Kay. I don't know. But many people have tried to emulate it. They've tried to throw their own posts up, and you can't duplicate that kind of legend. No. You just can't.
No, that's organic.
And the best part was, like, the next morning we were actually talking about it because we found out on Facebook there's a way to like resurrect a post after you've deleted it. So then it was, okay, do we bring it back because she's like reincarnated or rebuilt or re-downloaded? Or and we literally had this comment with the admins of the group, and we decided ultimately against it, but yeah, they made their own group, and they've been going strong over there.
500 members in this group the next day. I'm like, what? There's nothing here. What are you guys doing? And you know what they were doing? Memes of this dog over and over in every clever, brilliant way you could think of. It was honestly one of the funniest things I've ever been a part of. I couldn't stop laughing, and it was wrong. I felt bad about it, but I couldn't.
What's the group name? It's called Beyond K. Is that
Beyond
what it is?
K, Westworld Odyssey, I think it is, or something.
Beyond K, Westworld Odyssey. Perfect. That's great.
If Natalia is out there in the listening audience, Natalia had the best memes for this thing. The Ghostbusters meme, if you have not seen it, we'll try to get a link out somewhere either on ours or on the Shat page. But the Ghostbusters meme is probably the funniest thing you'll ever see in your entire life.
Just that dog. Just random pictures of a dog in a cowboy hat. It's so weird. I love
Classic.
it.
It's classic.
Well, talking about the group and the podcasts, I'd love to hear you all talk about some of the craziest theories you received over the course of the season. Troy, you want to start us off?
I think the biggest one, because we were still stuck on, is it a work light or a moon in that opening sequence shot? We could never figure out what the hell that thing was. Did it have sunglasses on? And then somebody made a comment during the show about the board is going to descend upon this place. And then it became, oh my gosh, either A, we're on another planet, or B, we're underwater. Mm-hmm. I think that was probably the most far out there theory that we heard, because then we're trying to figure out, okay, well then how does the train work? Does that go through like a tube like underneath Paris to London kind of thing? Maybe Westworld's in the UK and that's the island it's on. So yeah, I think the underwater planet concept, I think, was probably the craziest one that was out there.
So we had one, and we used to joke about them and call them Hall of Fame. You had ones that were just totally kind of out of left field and weren't even based in any fact. And those that you kind of, you got to push those to the side. The truly classic and the true ones that you have to really pay attention to are the ones that have enough fact there that, as unlikely as they are, they're still possible. You know, if you just come up and say, hey, we're on another planet. Okay, give me some facts. Tell me why you think this. We had someone write in, and his theory, I believe, was that the entire Westworld would be destroyed in the finale by a flood, by a large wave of water, and that Ford was constructing with the Earth Mover essentially a channel for all the water. And he went back and researched the origin of Teddy's name, and does Teddy have another brother, and the use of flood in his name. And it was so borderline crazy that we had to read it. And you can find it on the site, but it was classic.
I think it was called "The Flood is Coming to Westworld." Was the title of the Telegraph. It's on our website. You can read it. It's actually, if you search for the tag HOA, Hall of Fame, HOF. It's the one member of the Hall of Fame for truly insane theories. And again, we weren't gonna shoot him down for it. He took time to really write it out, and I said, we need to champion this. And we were going to send out tinfoil hats. He would get the first one if we had it.
Yeah. Is his name Troy Heinritz?
I was going to say, it sounds like my brother.
The one for me that I still look back and think of every single day is, and a lot of this never made it on air, but some of it did. Mostly because Big D does all the editing. But Big D called me up one day. It was probably in between the deep dive and the Telegraph. So Big D calls me up. It's like 6:00 at night. You know, he's supposed to be doing family time. He's supposed to be hanging out with family. He's supposed to be watching his daughter. But instead, he calls me up and he says, I figured it out. I've got it all figured out. I'm like, what have you figured out? He's like, Westworld. This is like episode 6, right? And he said, I have taken 8 pages of my life and written out an entire, I got it down. He's got formulas. He's got, pages, like it's like a bibliography where he's got links. It's like his own Wikipedia page, but on paper. And he's like, I can't wait to record. I'm going to bring this out. And essentially it's what we've called, Gene and I, it's the Robopocalypse. It's his Robopocalypse analogy where he went, 15 minutes on, it might have got edited down to 5. But that to me was I don't think not one of your theories, not one of your predictions came true in this whole Robo-apocalypse 8-page, manual on paper Wikipedia page. That to me still stands out as the craziest theory.
You sure about that, Rod? You sure none of it came true? Because the entire theory is based on the fact that Ford is essentially fostering an uprising, which is pretty much what we just witnessed. So I don't know about that.
I'm not keeping score.
Any other ones you want to be sure to highlight?
Yeah, I want to mention one a listener told me. A listener was messaging me. This is probably, I think it was right after the episode where you have Man in Black and Ford had a sit down. And they messaged me and this happened a lot throughout the podcast. So, there's a lot of them to go through. But one messaged me on Facebook and said, don't you think the Man in Black is Robert Ford? And I said, well, no. And well, didn't you see? I mean, it was obvious at the end of the episode. I'm like, what was obvious? I don't see it. I'm not displaying their theory. I'm trying to hear them out. I'm like, well, I mean, this whole time it was obviously Robert Ford. And that was the amount of the evidence because they sat down and had a conversation and Teddy was there. And I sat there and back and forth. It was probably an hour before I finally said, you haven't given me anything to justify why you feel that way. Well, because that would totally mess with your mind. Okay.
I call those our Westworld greatest hits. You know what I mean? Because it's like inevitably we receive 10 to 15 of the same theories each week. You know what I mean? And God bless those. I mean, really God bless them. But it's it's not quite Hall of Fame, but I call them greatest hits. It's like where Man in Black is Teddy, is William. You know what I mean? They're all based off the Teddy character is based off of William and the Hector character is based off of Logan, or the Logan truthers. They still believe to this day, even though we've seen the giant reveal, that Logan is the Man in Black.
Or every black character that appears on the show happens to be related to every other black character on the show because there's only one family of black people in the world.
Or Charlotte is Charlie, and Charlie is the daughter of Bernard, exactly. You know, that's yeah. Come on, guys, really.
Do you guys, Aaron and Troy, do you guys find that when people write in to you or when you're reading, there's no ambiguity or like they're not questioning it. It's a statement.
Yes.
You know, it's always like this is it. And as you said, Aaron, obviously that's how it is. That baffles me.
Well, I think it's great though. I mean, it's like if a show makes you that passionate about anything, I think it's great to be that definitive about anything that's obviously very open-ended. I think is probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me personally, but you know, a lot of people also were very, very steadfast in the William is the Man in Black thing, and that came out pretty much on their side. So you just never know which way it's going to go. I tend to try to keep a little bit more of an open mind, but yeah, most of the emails are very much, this is how I see it. I don't know how you guys don't see it this way. And especially if you're talking about in the podcast, well, you guys obviously aren't watching the same show I am. I'm sure we are. I'm sure we are.
Now, there must have been some other, getting ready to do this kind of crossover show, there must have been some other listener questions or some other questions specific to the episodes that you guys wanted to address.
Yeah, I think there were a couple that came in right for this specific episode. We tweeted out and we looked back at some of the Westworld Telegraph's emails that came in after the season finale. One, and I apologize, I didn't write the name down here, but one question was, if William bought the entire park, why did he allow Dolores to go through her rape loop every day? So I think this is talking to the fact that, like, if William truly loved Dolores, right, we see that throughout what we called timeline or time frame 30, right? Why did he allow her to do that? If he's part of the board that supposedly saved this park, wouldn't he be aware of that narrative? Any thoughts on this, guys?
I think by the end of the season 1, it was very clear to him that it's not mutual. So to him, he saw her as property. He saw her as she's just performed to do what she's performed to do or programmed to do. And that's all. That's it. I mean, she's just a product of her programming. That's all she is. That's why I think that might actually be one of the guiding principles or reasons for him to seek out the maze and set the robots free. So he actually has more of a challenge and maybe even win Dolores, rightfully so. I just don't think he saw her as anything more than property at that point. Once he saw someone else pick up her can, someone else picking up my Dolores's can, he's just like, oh no, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I mean, obviously now I see what everything is. And I don't think he saw her as my Dolores, my love anymore. He just saw her as property at that point.
He was also lactose intolerant after that long trip. So
sure.
Because it was a can of milk. Anyway, well, and the other thing too is that he was one of the original investors in TF30, but at the same time, I don't think he really became a full owner percentage of the park until much later on in his tenure as the Man in Black, a board member, if you will. So from that perspective, I think he didn't have much influence initially, and it wasn't until he became more interested in the maze concept, which happened technically 1 year before Dolores started going on it for that last trip. So from that perspective, I think that it wasn't a matter of allowing her to be raped all the time. I think he was just trying to figure out a way to gain enough control so that he could then dictate how he wanted the park to be experienced.
Can I just say, we don't know she was raped by him. I mean, we don't know that part, right?
She was raped. Her loop was a rape loop.
Yeah.
Like, Rebus would always take her to the barn.
We don't think that the Man in Black raped her. But I have another take on this. The Man in Black, granted, we're talking 20 some odd years, but when he encounters Maeve in the out in the frontier with her daughter, and it's the first time that he sees one of them, and he says something like, she was alive. There was something that happened to her. And he ties it directly to that traumatic event. Do we think there's a possibility that William still holds some of the affection for her? And by allowing her to be victimized, he's maybe hoping that the traumatic experience will trigger that same awakening in Dolores?
The way the show was played out, this is Gene, by the way. The way the show played out, I don't think so. William has a lot of character flaws that people seem to gloss over. He's juvenile. He also seems to feel like he has to be very special. Like he has to be the one that makes her change. Even look at the Man in Black's gear, right? He gave himself a freaking superhero name, basically. And then he's got to have just the right knife. He's got to have that special revolver. Everything's got to be, just so. And the guy is obsessed with standing out and it's a character flaw from day one with William. He's got to be different. He's got to act differently toward the park. And so in that exclusivity, once he sees, as Aaron said, someone else pick up that can, she's no longer his and he doesn't care. He's not interested in her. What he's interested in is the game now. His new love, the thing that he's in love with, is the game, because the game is more real. And if I could take it a step further, and feel free to edit this if you want to, but this goes back to pornography, actually. In pornography, they found it was very, very difficult to make a person believe an actress was enjoying herself, because an actress enjoying herself, that's a very hard thing to portray. Like pleasure is a hard thing to portray. A genuine orgasm is a hard thing to portray. So what they did was they resorted to anal. Anal became the believable thing, because pain.
Where did this go?
Because pain is believable. This is absolutely an allegory. Pain is believable. It's easier to portray, and it's more satisfying, more gratifying initially. So he knows that he's seen something fake. He wants to see something real. He wants to see pain. Mic drop.
I got nothing.
Is anal one of those 7 words we discussed?
I don't think so. I think that's good. I don't know what the rules are.
Sorry, Troy.
This is what Gene learns on his moped rallies in New Orleans.
That's where Can takes him. Apparently, he thinks about Boris is Can, and
no, actually, Gene, that's actually, unfortunately, that's true. Like that's a very real thing. That is a very real study that was done by a college and university that I don't have a link to, but I remember hearing that, and so. But if you were to apply that to Westworld, right? If you were thinking of a way to, like, we always joke about how, like, in the original movie, Westworld, they said, well, the hands were the things that would give it away. And even in the show, right? The fact that they couldn't get quite right, the human engineers couldn't get the emotions right. It was all black or white or good or bad. And Dr. Ford needed to create Bernard to show that emotion. So if you could think in the era that we are right now, where we're creating AI, you've got to imagine that that's probably, if there's going to be a park similar to this, and that they're going to create sex robots. Like, that's one of the first things that, if you look back in history, that's the thing that sells the most, at least the initial thing, right? The internet exploded initially. Why? It wasn't to share ideas.
Research.
It wasn't for research. I can tell you that. What created the idea of finance and created the first internet millionaires were the peddling of smut and pornography. So you've got to think that what's going to first get consumerism traction with AI is what? Probably pornography. So getting the emotion right, having a robot convey that they're enjoying that is probably going to be one of the, like, there's going to be an engineer that's not going to be solving world hunger. He's not going to be solving, like, what are military applications? He's probably going to be like, will this robot, like, enjoy what this person is doing, creating some sort of self-fulfillment as a result of it. And they want the most believable robot possible, because that would make the most money. I mean, these people aren't paying $40,000 for nothing, right? To go to Westworld?
No. And apparently they got to make sure the batteries don't go out either. So I don't know.
That's all lithium ions, right? Or they're solar powered. That's why Kissy's scalp has the maze. That's actually a solar powered, circuit.
I don't want my solar powered sex bot. I want something with lithium. That's what I want.
That's right.
Now, one question, a topic that I personally had that I'd like to hear some thoughts on is the Felix character, because I hear lots of things, and I have lots of thoughts too, but I'm curious to hear you guys. Why did he do what he appeared to do? Gene, you want to start that off?
Well, I think the Felix character fulfills a very interesting role in all this, and that is, someone wrote in and they said, if William ends up being the Man in Black, then the only genuinely good human that we see in the entire show ends up being evil or bad or a negative force, a malevolent force. And therefore, we already established in episode 1 that people are bad and less human than the hosts. And so that would just, it fulfills that. So we need someone that gives us hope, someone who is a human, but also has good intentions. Now, as Aaron mentioned, and I think Troy echoed, it's terrible that he somehow equates Maeve's freedom as being more valuable than all the people who get slaughtered. That somehow is okay. And I think all of us from the get-go said, oh, well, he's got to be a host. That's the only reason he's letting her get away with all this, or he's been ordered to, by someone. But I'm starting to think more and more that there's more to Felix, that there's a certain, he represents genuine humanity.
Troy?
Well, the thing with Felix for me was the minute we saw him for the first time, the first thing he does is he's dabbling with the bird. And he's clearly this low-level butcher. He's the fry cook, for lack of a better analogy. And everybody wants to become management. They always want something better for themselves. And I really think it was a great juxtaposition between Felix's character and Dolores, when Dolores said, I just thought of myself not as the damsel anymore, and I wanted to be something else. He was clearly on that same path where he truly wanted to better himself in some way. And for him, that was, I'm a coder, so why can't I be in behavior or QA or something of that nature? And I think that's where he progressed. I think the human casualty count around him, as Aaron likes to point out, is more a byproduct of helping Maeve and the situation that happened because of Maeve. It's not like Felix was out there with a gun shooting everybody and taking them out to clear a path. He was
but he was, though. He facilitated it. That makes him just as culpable.
Yeah, I agree that he's culpable, but at the same time, he, at the end of the day, was just trying to better himself, which was the same thing that Dolores was trying to do, was better herself. And I think that's what makes Felix's character probably one of the more interesting humans, so that way we could actually, like, as Gene was saying, there really was no hope in the show, because when we finally get the reveal that the Man in Black is indeed William, and then literally Dolores looks at him and starts crying, like, I'm crying for you because of what you've turned into. We literally lost all hope in the show. Now, you could say that Robert Ford maybe added a little bit of hope back into it because he was trying to help the hosts gain their sentient consciousness and get them to that point. But really, Felix is kind of our hope as humans to say we still strive and we still want to be developed and we still want to strive for something better. And I think that's what Felix's character brought to the table.
I'm going to drop something real quick on here. I think actually Felix is the biggest plot hole of the whole season. Honestly, I think it's a big problem for the whole season, just because Maeve's entire narrative / storyline, however you want to look at it, hinges on the fact that he's willing to help her. So he's okay. He understands that she's a life form. I get that. He supports wanting to save her. I get that. But when it comes to the point that he's okay with other humans being extinguished based on his efforts, that's where I have a hard time with it, because, okay, I'm with him helping her to save her own life. But when she's killing other people and she's facilitating, he's directly facilitating other murders, other deaths. His coworkers, maybe not his friends, maybe he looked down on them, whatever. But regardless, when that happens, I mean, that to me is really, it's a hard pill to swallow. It's a very hard pill to swallow.
I don't think he's okay with it. He mentions multiple times, you promised you wouldn't hurt someone. You promised this wouldn't happen. He is a sympathetic character who, we have to remember how Maeve chose him. Maeve pretended to be asleep multiple times. The first time she wakes up, she calls them by names. She's been scouting out which tech would be the most susceptible to her, who showed the most compassion. She selected Felix because he was the most vulnerable. He was victimized by Sylvester, who dominated him, who talked down to him. And she saw him tinkering with life, that he valued even that little bird. And she knew that Felix he was probably disgusted by working in the butcher shop. He was disgusted by his coworkers pulling off the host and having sex down in the body shop. He was probably looking for a reason. And I think a lot of people in life who feel victimized by the society around them are looking for someone to latch onto. And Maeve to him was that. She was something pure. She was the ideological, being of what humans should be. And I think as much as he went against what she did in the end, it was a nice change for him for what he was living with daily.
I think, man, I respect your opinion. I just disagree. I completely.
Well,
I think threw in that token line, well, you're a terrible human. It's kind of like, okay, well, this is why. See, he's just a terrible human. That justifies everything. And it just didn't work for me. That was a big problem for me for the season.
Well, listen, Aaron and Big D, I agree with both of you. Let me try and present a couple questions here for you. So nothing I think was done without a purpose, right? When they wrote the story, when Jonah Nolan and Lisa Joy wrote it, right? So the idea that Felix, and Sylvester are the two characters, right? I think we related to them as an audience because we looked at Felix as more of a sympathetic Elsie. Elsie cared for the hosts, right? She was attracted to the host. She cared about their well-being, but she was also a little, she knew too much for her own good. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like she was
very articulate and mechanical about her.
Right. And Felix was more like us, like Big D just said, he wanted to better himself. And so we as the audience looked at that and we could relate ourselves in a Felix character. And the idea that they're named after cats is, I think he's doing it out of curiosity. He's doing it initially because he wants to see where this goes. And probably to your plot hole idea, Aaron, the only idea that, he would allow this to probably happen is, number one, they're not killing him. Right. And they threaten to kill him and they've seen them kill others. So if I was put in that situation, I probably would follow along too for hopes of not getting killed. The only plot hole that I will agree with you on, though, is why doesn't he just get on the train and get out of there?
Or wipe,
right? Because if they
wipe them himself, he can wipe them. Why doesn't he just wipe them?
I have a point for that. So you say plot hole, and I say it's actually probably one of the most brilliant inserts in the show. Because when you think about it, we don't know this at the time the whole Felix thing is going along, but at the end, we find out that this entire concept of Maeve has been scripted the whole time. She was programmed to wake up. She was scripted to do all of this stuff. So when you think about it in terms of inside the park, Felix is really no different than, say, Logan or William as a human, as a park attendee, and he is the human that is inserted into the storyline to carry the storyline along. So in that regard, Felix is actually probably the most interesting character because of that, because we're actually seeing him find out who he can become, not who he just is.
Let me ask you this. So we know that Dr. Ford was probably the one that was laying out all the cards, right? We know that someone was messing with Maeve's code under the name of Arnold. Do we assume that was Dr. Ford?
Yes, I would agree that that's the assumption.
Okay, so Dr. Ford, we know, has said what in the past? We know everything about our guests and our
employees.
Right. So you know that he probably knew that Felix was down there and Felix was the type of employee that would be involved with a waking up host. And that could, when you think about all the things that we were asked, like, how could he really get along? Like someone in the body shop walking along this host on all the different levels that he was on. It's probably because Dr. Ford was allowing it to happen. Dr. Ford was allowing all this to happen. He knew that Felix would be the type of character that would work in coercion with the narrative that he wanted Maeve to go on so that she could achieve sentience. So when you think about it and you put it in that light, it makes sense.
It doesn't make sense, but it feels like it's stretched out to make it make sense.
There you go.
All right.
Whoever would have thought we would have spent 10 minutes talking about like the last person on the character list.
Well,
not Big D. He's been down this route before. He's been down this narrative.
Most.
It's his loop.
No. That's the wonderful thing about this season. There could be these deep discussions about every single character in there. Well, without running
except for Destin, he was just a complete tool.
He deserved a gutting. Absolutely.
With that in mind, as we kind of get to the wrap-up stage, were there any other topics or things you wanted to be sure to hit on, guys, before we wrap things up?
The website, I think, is something we should probably address, because one of the things that was great about, I get, as Aaron said, get paid to mention it, Lost, when it was going on, was the in-between seasons and the stuff that happened on the different various websites, whether it was Oceanic Flight 815, or if it was the Find Flight 815 mini game that was out there, or taking the test to become part of the Dharma Initiative before season 5. So having the interaction with the website, I think, was something that was very, very great from the beginning. I wonder if the people that get to experience Westworld after us, the people that watch it in 17 or are catching up on it before the 18 premiere, do they lose something because they didn't get that visceral real time? I mean, literally as that show was going down, right, the finale, we get the email from Aiden or not even from Aiden, it was from Delos that said, hey, the security panel's been tapped. We got all this video and all the security cameras. We get the reveal that it's 2052 when the present time takes place. And then we get, of course, Aiden being completely crazy with his red text or heard red text. We don't even know if it's a guy or a girl still to this day, because Aiden would never answer that question every time I asked it. So just that experience of the website, I thought was fabulous tie-in, especially when you got the email every week about the map would change and we'd see new places. I mean, I don't know how much you guys got time to spend on the website because you're reading through 70,000 emails.
to be quite honest, I didn't get a chance a lot to go on if there was one thing that I really depended on our fans to do, is to point out those things on Discover Westworld and Delos Incorporated. Cause we just didn't have enough time, to be quite honest. But let me ask you guys this: in a world and in a landscape where television is, we're so used to having things on demand and binge watching entire episodes at once, with the rise of Netflix now, and there's, even on other channels, they're releasing full series at once, right, to drive that traffic. I thought it was awesome to really go back to a show where we could weekly follow along with the series week by week. Do we think that introduction of the website, do shows no longer just depend on the weekly release, and now they have to do this, extra additional multimedia experience? Like, that's the only way to have a successful weekly series?
I don't think so, because I honestly don't know. I think it's a minority that went to the website. I think there's absolutely a faction of diehards that did it. But overall, most people I know didn't even know there was a website. So I don't think that really drove it. I really think it was what are people talking about? What are people talking about? I got to check out this show people are talking about. And then you couple that with kind of like what I call the Walking Dead backlash, which is people wanted to watch something else on Sunday nights that had a little bit something different to it. And I think those two things collided and made this just a cultural event. I don't think the website really drove it as much as we'd like to think it did.
Does the website help longevity? Because, I mean, we're obviously doing fan podcasts, right? So we're doing this weekly. We're having these conversations so people can get, quote unquote, extra content around their favorite television program. So is this something that mainstream media should actually take advantage of, because it helps the people get a deeper connection to the properties they love, which will then get better lock-in for that particular brand, in this case, Westworld. And because of that, they now have this core set of audience that's going to stay with the website for 18 months until the show comes back, and get all of their news that way. I mean, the website was where we learned about the episode 2 reveal, that episode 2 came out early. And so we all got to watch it early, and we all raced to put out our podcast against each other early.
Yeah, it was a Thursday night. It was Oktoberfest that we had to rush back from and record the podcast. A little bit buzzed. But, it's I mean, we all talk about the loss factor, right? And we go back to it because I think Lost was like the original weekly series that I can remember that had that full multimedia experience, that used the full power of the web to interact with fans. And there were message boards. And I mean, that was, it was web 1.0, right? Even though it seems so ancient. What was that, like 2006, 2007? Mm-hmm. But today, I mean, are there, outside of Mr. Robot, what other shows are really using the full factors of multimedia to interact with their fans, like a Delos Incorporated, interactive site where fans can learn more? Is there any other show that you guys can think of? Does Blacklist have anything like this?
No. Mostly, I think these days it's mostly fan sites that do this. I mean, to the greater extent, maybe Game of Thrones might have something, but I think that's probably even a fan site that's orchestrated. It's just one of those things. I don't think studios do it or networks do it anymore.
And it's all about budget. I mean, at the end of the day, Blacklist did a really great thing where they did this, like a Ram's Notes for season 1, where he got a little bit of extra content, but it was all show specific, network driven. And it was literally what was in their normal vein, right? It's a video blog at the end of the day.
And there's Spotify tracks.
And I think in that case, the Spotify tracks were actually really kind of a nice thing for Blacklist, where they actually had each character create their own music for that character. So it helped you understand that character a little bit better through their music. So I think that was something that was a little bit different and unique and interesting, because Blacklist a lot of the time is about its music. And so with that perspective, it actually added something to the show for the diehard fans that wanted to search that out. But again, it just depends on what you're trying to do about a lock-in brand concept. I mean, think about Blacklist. I mean, NBC was faltering until Blacklist showed up. And now you had, The Voice and then the Blacklist. And then all of a sudden NBC now has like all the great shows again. And ABC seems to be the one that's the floundering, from the big three. So I think that it would behoove networks, especially the big three or big four, if you want to include Fox and the CW and all that stuff, to look at some of the stuff that HBOs and the Netflixes of the world are doing, because they may go the way of the dinosaur in that regard, because there are people that do want this extra second level experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you think of, there's different ways to consume that, right? Reddit, podcasts, their own website. But I think it's that full, circle. And I think it's just neat to be part of that experience. I think it was neat to meet other podcasters like yourself who were this involved with it. It was neat keeping up with it. I mean, there were a couple times, unfortunately, I don't know if you guys did it, but there were a couple of weeks where, Gene and Big D wanted to kill me. I wanted to kill them. Like we were like, we're done with it. We're never doing another podcast again. Like right now, Big D's signaling he wants to kill me right now because he says we're going over time. But that's the fun of it, right? That's the cool thing about it. Kevin, back to you.
No, I want to say last episode we did the finale or whatever. We've actually gotten a couple emails because I was too mean to Troy, but it was too mean to him because, and it wasn't intentional. One, it was just being tired because we just watched the episode like 8 times. It felt like before we recorded, but also because while we're doing it, he's still throwing out more theories. I'm like, come on, I've had enough theories. I don't need any more. And I just got theory overload. So I think I got snippier about the theories.
We could relate.
Well, it was all, though, creating some great entertainment for your listeners. So some great stuff there. Well, as you've mentioned throughout the discussion, we're not going to be getting new episodes until 2018. But I'm sure the 5 of you are not going to take a year off as far as providing entertainment. So maybe you can talk a little bit about briefly some of the other content that you folks create that folks can keep up with you on.
Sure, I'll go first. Kind of mentioned some already, but one of the things we haven't talked about yet is I do a sports podcast for the 13-time NFL champion Green Bay Packers called the Packers Fan Podcast. We were in our 6th season, so we're having some fun there, and with a big victory just recently over the Seattle Seahawks. Packers look like they may be a formidable foe in the NFC come playoff time, hopefully. So that would be fun. Aaron and I do a show called The Blacklist Exposed on our parent network, Golden Spiral Media. So you can check that out at goldenspiralmedia.com. And the Blacklist podcast specifically at theblacklistexposed.com. Interviewed some of the actors. Megan Boone came by the show, the lead actress. She's a lot of fun. Chatted with John Bokenkamp a few times, the creator. So definitely check that out if you're around. And if you love J.J. Abrams stuff, we actually have a bunch of J.J. Abrams stuff on the network. We have the Fringe podcast, the big one, when Fringe was on. So you can check that out at Golden Spiral Media /podcasts. And then also we did 11/22/63 on Hulu, which was the time travel Stephen King, J.J. Abrams crossover type event. So check that out again. That's at 11/22/63podcast.com.
Shat on TV, we just announced, Big D, that we've got 2 on the docket for 2017. Is that right? Do you want me to explain it? Okay. Yeah. Thank you for the nonverbal cues again. Great for podcasting. Yeah. So we're picking up in January with Taboo, a show on FX that's executive and produced by and written and starring Tom Hardy. It's got a slew of fantastic actors. It's all about the East India Trading Company and the character comes back almost from life. He's, considered dead, and then he's taking over his father's company against, the great and powerful big East India Trading Company, which at the time, it was just a fascinating story. I know Gene's microphone unfortunately cut out, so he can't talk here, but he was texting us today. He bought a huge book on the East India Trading Company to get caught up on it. So that's the next show that we're doing. And then following right after Taboo, we're going to do the Star series, American Gods, and that's based on the Neil Gaiman novel, this massive undertaking that, has gone through multiple iterations. I think HBO originally tried to adapt it going way back to 2011, and now it's picked up by Star. So it'll be a fantastic show to do. And then you can also check us out on shatthemovies.com, where we look back at 80s and 90s film that our audience votes on. So we'll pick that back up. We've already got like 10 episodes in the can, but we want to pick that back up with a Christmas movie. So check that out, shatthemovies.com, and you can find out Taboo and American Gods already on iTunes, but just go to shatontv.com and you can find all the links there. So that's what you can expect going forward from the Shat on Entertainment Network.
And Troy already alluded to The Blacklist Exposed and his other shows. Beyond Westworld Podcast, obviously, Beyond Westworld Podcast. But I also do 2 different shows and they're both available at thehollywoodoutsiders.com. One is every week we do a podcast called The Hollywood Outsider, which is kind of we talk about movie and TV news, review any new releases, and it's more casual, laid back, leisurely, and hopefully fun. where we just talk about things that are on all entertainment fans' minds. And then we do the Remake This Movie Right podcast, which Troy's been on many, many times. And essentially what we do is we take a movie that is being remade, and we talk about the original, what we loved about it, what we didn't love about it, and then we kind of craft a remake of that film. Kind of think of it as when you're sitting around with your friends and you're talking about, man, I wish Hollywood wouldn't have done that. I could have remade it better. We could have remade it better. That's what this podcast is. And it's a lot of fun. We've had a lot of great opportunities with it. We actually had the writer of Short Circuit come on and help remake his own movie. And he's actually come back several times to do other remakes. And we should be having other filmmakers come on for season 3. So definitely check that out. You can either go to remakethismovieright.com or everything is available at thehollywoodoutsider.com.
Yeah, that's cool. I think from a next pod swap idea, this is the Raj again. I would love to have you guys on Shat the Movies, I would love personally. I love that concept of remaking this movie right. So if you would, if you ever want to invite someone on who's not a screenwriter, we would love to come on.
We're already getting season 3 lined up. It's actually, we just finished the last one for this season, and we're starting season 3. I think the end of January it'll start coming out, and we'll definitely set it up. We'll definitely work that out. Absolutely.
Cool. And if you have any suggestions for any shows that you want us to do after American Gods and Taboo, our email address is hosts@shatontv.com. You can also follow us on social media. We're everywhere: Facebook media, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter's our main source of communication. We're at Shat on TV. I personally am at Roger_Roper. Gene is at Gene_Lyons_, and Dick is at Dick_Ebert. So make sure you give us a follow on Twitter. We'd love, we're highly active on there.
Excellent. Well, hopefully all you folks enjoyed some of this discussion, and we look forward to providing you some more in the coming months, and certainly by the time Westworld comes back. So thanks again for listening, and we hope you all take care.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Troy. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Gene.